Excuse me, good morning. My name is Amanda Rivera. I'm the hearing examiner presiding over today's case. The date is February 16th, 2023, and this is case SEZ2021-00016. Because this is a quasi-judicial hearing, all evidence and testimony must be taken under oath. So if you intend to speak, if you could please raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will provide is the truth?
I do.
Thank you. For the members of the public that are here this morning, just in terms of how things will proceed, first we're going to hear from the applicant. They're going to present their request in the case, which is a special exception for the Telegraph Creek Community Park. Following their presentation and any witnesses that they may call to support their request, then we will hear from the county staff. They will present their recommendation in this case, which is a recommendation of approval with conditions. After we hear from the county staff, then I will open it up for the public comment. There is only one opportunity to speak, so I would encourage you to take notes as we go through things this morning so you can make the most of your time at the podium. There is no time limitation, however, so you can speak for as long as you would like. I would just ask that if folks before you have said something that you agree with, you can indicate that you agree with that rather than just repeat and have the same comments on the record. There are comment cards by the door, so if you could complete one of those and bring them forward, then I'll call them in the order that I receive them. And I will open it up to anyone else who wanted to speak before we close public comment. After we close public comment, we'll come back to the applicant and the staff for their rebuttal to address any comments that were made and answer any questions that you may have, and then to provide their closing comments. So with that, we can begin with the applicant. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Christine Fisher, and I am principal planner with Johnson Engineering. We're the agent for this particular item that's on your agenda today. Our applicant is Lee County Parks and Recreation Department, and we have several members from the department here today. Armand, Jason Lamy, Emily Gear. We also have Jesse Lavender and Brandon as well. Today's item is a special exception request overview. We're seeking a approval for a park group 2, including improvements within the agricultural zoning district, which is the AG2 district. This park is classified as a regional park since improvements are funded through regional impact fees, and it also draws from a larger area. That's provided in LDC section 34-622C32. And then the special exception is needed for any Group 2 park that falls within this category in the agricultural AG2 zoning district per LDC section 34-653. Staff has recommended approval, and the applicant has no issues with the staff report. A little bit of background on the site. The site location, it is a 0.84 acre parcel that's located at 15700 North River Road. As I mentioned, it's zoned AG2 agriculture. Everything surrounding it is also zoned the same. It's within the rural future land use category, and everything around it is also in the same. It's also in the Northeast Lee County Community Plan area. Adjacent parcels are large lot, single family. It abuts Telegraph Creek, a tributary of the Caloosahatchee River, which is also a route on the Lee County's 190-mile Great Colusa Blueway. A little bit of history on the site. As far back as we can tell, 1998 at least, it was used as an informal paddlecraft launch. Between 2017 and 2019, the owners of the property restricted access to it, and then Lee County acquired the property in January of 2020 with the intention of making a passive park out of it. In September 21, 2 open house public meetings were held to talk about the proposed improvements on the site. And then in November of 2021, the Board of County Commissioners approved a $235,000 capital improvement project to enhance the Telegraph Creek primitive paddlecraft launch. This is the conceptual plan for the site. The improvements include relocating that primitive kayak launch on the site. Today, it is located partially in the right-of-way, the North River Road right-of-way, and the concept is to move it on site. Adding a fishing observation deck and access walkway. a picnic area, and ancillary parking. Right now, cars are being parked along the right-of-way to access the site. The design is minimized the design is set up to minimize impacts to natural resources. For instance, the surface materials are intended to be gravel where it can be gravel. And for instance, with handicap parking, it would need to be something that is allowable for handicap access. The platform elevation will conform to LDC regulations. Setbacks are met. The buffers are the 50-foot natural waterway buffer, as well as a 25-foot right-of-way buffer along the front. There's also a wetland line that's been determined. The parking is considered low turnover, which is minimal traffic impact, which means they sit for a long time. And no utilities, no bathrooms, nothing like that will be provided on the site. It is meant to be passive. Here we have conformance with the special exception criteria. These are the LDC Section 34-145 C3A criteria. Number one, we feel it's consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies and intent of the LEED plan. In the future land use element, Goal 1, Policy 1.41, this falls within the rural future land use category, and the use is consistent with the rural character of the community. Goal 2, Undergrowth Management, Policy 2.1.3, provides opportunity for public recreation uses. Goal 27, Northeast Lee County Community Plan, both policies 27.32 and 27.33 are policies that promote and enhance public access to public lands and surface waters and water-related recreation on those waterways. Goal 29, the North Olga Community Plan, since this falls in the North Olga community area. Objective 29.6, promoting access to public resources while supporting ecotourism and water-based recreational opportunities. In addition to the future land use element, other elements such as the parks, recreation, and open space element, Goal 76 provides for equitable park access to all county residents, as well as Goal 85, which is about park planning and designing with buffers to protect adjacent uses, incorporating best professional practices. Community facilities and services element, Goal 61, not obstruct, and Policy 61.3.3, not obstructing waterways. So with this site, we would have to obtain a no-rise certification as part of the process as it gets approved. And then in the conservation and coastal element, Goal 124 is the wetlands policy, and that policy 124.1.1, minimizing impacts to existing wetland community, and any potential impacts will be mitigated in accordance with the permitting agencies that require such things. The second criteria is to protect and conserve on environmentally critical and sensitive areas, natural resources where applicable. In this instance, all of the trees within the right-of-way buffer will be retained. Improvements within the right-of-way buffer are limited to that primitive kayak launch. Also, the walkway to the fishing platform within the waterway buffer will be elevated. The site design minimizes any impacts to the wetland community. The improvements are on the northernmost part of the property, and the wetlands are on the southern 2/3 of the property. It doesn't mean there won't be any wetland impacts, but further analysis will need to be done, and anything that does impact will have to be mitigated. And as such, state review and approval is required to ensure that all of the environmentally sensitive areas are protected. As I mentioned, the applicant will have to obtain a FEMA no-rise certification prior to the development order, and then any wetland impacts would require the state of Florida, and USA Army Corps of Engineer permits would likely require any mitigation that would impact the wetlands on site. Number 3, will be compatible with existing and planned uses. As mentioned, the use is consistent with the community's rural character. All the trees existing and internal to the site will be preserved unless there's a conflict that requires removal. There's a large oak tree near the entry that will also be preserved. The parking area is set back 30 feet from the property to the west. As I mentioned, it meets the setbacks, and it's separated by all native vegetation. If enhancement is needed, that will be done as well. And then the 50-foot natural waterway buffer is provided on both the south and the east abutting Telegraph Creek. These proposed improvements provide amenities for the benefit of the surrounding community and also the general public. Number 4 criteria, that the improvements would not be injurious to the neighborhood or detrimental to the public welfare. The proposed improvements will make the location safer and easier to access, as previously mentioned. Right now, cars are being parked on the right-of-way, and the kayak launch, primitive kayak launch, is partially on the right-of-way. The use would generate minimal traffic impacts, as I mentioned, and provide this low turnover parking, so there should not be a lot of traffic. The proposed parking area will alleviate the existing parking in the right-of-way, which makes it safer for both the pedestrians and the motorists. And the on-site recreational activities are passive and should not generate excessive noise, smoke, dust, odor, or any other negative impacts. The 5th criteria, that it would be in compliance with the zoning regulations pertaining to the use and any other applicable regulations. The proposed parking area will comply with the requirements of Division 26 parking within the LDC. The proposed facilities will be buffered in accordance with LDC Chapters 10 and 33. The passive recreation facilities that are within the required buffers, that would be the walkway and the primitive kayak launch, will comply with the LDC Section 10 for 16D11 standards.
Not to interrupt,
Yes.
what is the purpose of it being within the right-of-way buffer? Was there no opportunity to move it out of the buffer?
There was the desire to preserve those trees and no real need to keep moving it further inland. It's all going to be gravel in that area anyway, and very minimal impact for the floodway issues and such. And then the fishing pier observation deck would be designed to meet the requirements of LDC Section 2673, which are very specific. The access walkways can't be larger than 4 feet in width, and that deck can't exceed 260 square feet, or extend more than 200 feet from the mean water line, or extend waterward more than 25% of the channel width.
From the mean water line.
Nor extend waterward more than 25% of the channel width. It also has to be at a certain elevation over mean water line. Public notice was provided. As I mentioned, there were 2 open house public meetings that were done in both the Olga Community Center and the Alva Community Center shortly after the property was purchased to discuss plans for the site. Zoning notification signs for this meeting were posted on January 31st in accordance with Section C1C Lee County Administrative Code. And then the Lee County Community Development also mailed their notices in conformance with requirements from the Administrative Code. So to summarize, the special exception request is for a special exception within the agricultural A2 zoning district pursuant to LDC Section 34-653 to permit a Group 2 park, including the development of a primitive kayak launch, observation fishing pier, picnic table, and parking area. Being passive, it is compatible with surrounding uses. It is consistent with the special exception criteria in the LDC, and it's consistent with the Lee plan. And that concludes the presentation. I have 2 exhibits, the PowerPoint presentation, as well as just a blow-up of the conceptual plan, if you want to enter that into evidence.
Yes, please. So the PowerPoint would be applicant's exhibit 1, and your 48-hour letter was pre-labeled applicant's exhibit A, and then the master concept plan would be applicant's exhibit 2. Could you put, yes, please. Can you put up the site plan again just for a moment? Thank you. Thank you. I didn't see a key or anything. Can you just identify what the green square and then the red and blue dots would be?
Up here?
Yes.
This is that picnic area. It's going to be a picnic table with trash receptacles.
Okay. And then I believe it said there would be 7 parking spaces.
There's 7 and a handicap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and a handicap space.
Okay, and how was that number arrived? Is that historic use since it's been used for that purpose? Is that kind of what the average?
I think it was, I could ask
Uses.
somebody from staff that might have a better understanding, because I know they had laid up the site plan before I was involved with it, but I think it had to do with the director's decision on how many might be needed for a site like this.
Yeah, if we could just get some testimony about how that number was arrived at and just,
Sure.
I would assume since it's been in operation, I think you said since 1998, you've got some historical data to show how often folks are actually utilizing it.
That is correct. That is exactly what we did.
I'm sorry, if you could,
I'm sorry, I'm Jesse Lavner. I'm the Director of Lee County Parks and Recreation, and that is exactly what we conceptualized the parking lot off of.
okay. And just because it's a low turnover use, so my understanding is the idea is people come, they're parked all day, so you wouldn't want to have a situation where folks are coming to access it and still parking on the right of way. So is 7 in excess of what you would expect to plan for that?
7 is what fits on the site. It's a very small site, and historically, 7 has been, even today, on the right-of-way. That's about our capacity at the site, and it is monitored by our Lee County Ranger unit, so, for enforcement.
And it'll just be gravel, I think I read as well? A gravel.
Yes, I believe so, yes.
Thank you. That was the extent of the questions I had. Did staff have any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Can never get this mouse. There it is. I'm just talking to myself. That's what kind of day it is.
It feels like a Monday today. That is completely fine.
There we go.
Good morning.
Good morning, Beth Workman, for the record from the zoning section. I have the PowerPoint, get some housekeeping things out of the way. I have the PowerPoint for the hearing examiner as well as the applicant.
Thank you. That will be staff exhibit 2 because staff exhibit 1 was the staff report.
All right. Okay. So we're here today to hear SEZ 2021-00016, Telegraph Creek Community Park. The request is to allow a parks Group 2 use on the subject parcel per LDC 34653. In that section, it requires a special exception to allow the use. The applicant is requesting to permit an observation deck / fishing pier, permit a primitive paddlecraft kayak launch, permit picnic table and ancillary parking area. There are no restrooms proposed, and staff did recommend approval with some conditions. So I want to go into a little bit of history because this thing has a lot of backlog history about the ownership. So originally, this was owned, it's frontage on North River Road. It's in the rural future land use, as Christine had mentioned. The property was created in 1946 through a deed within the McCoy family. The McCoy family owned everything you see here in the blue and the yellow. The conveyance of the western property to the Ruddle property less and except the TK property. So it was TK, Crawford eventually ended up with it, but Rudell owned it in between. And then the McCoys still had a hand in the TK property. James McCoy, who was the son in the family. In 1948, he acquired that through inheritance. And so then the Crawfords obtained the Rudell portion in 1953. And the importance of all of this is that little red part right there, when the legal descriptions were done for this property, this red part became part of the TK part inherently. It was an erroneous legal description error. So they came back through and revised the legal description. And when it was deeded to the Crawfords, it still was incorrect. So there's a boundary line agreement recorded in 2019 prior to the county acquiring the TK property for this little sliver. So this is owned by the same folks right now. And so the TK property, now the Lee County property, abuts a portion of this and not directly to the creek. So that's kind of important just by the history of things and the acquiring and the creation of the lot. Also, what's important is that back in the 50s, Florida State Road Department, they commissioned a right-of-way map that took a 15-foot strip to widen North River Road, and it came onto this property. So some of the uses that we keep talking about that are in the right-of-way, they historically wouldn't have been, but in the 50s, this 15-foot strip was taken. So that's the history lesson for today. So the surrounding uses, which is important for this case to meet the criteria, this is our property. It's surrounded by the rural future land use category, as it's in the rural future land use category as well. The uses surrounding the property are all large AG2 lots with residential structures on them. And then, as you can see, the eastern part abuts the Telegraph Creek, which is a tributary going down to the Caloosahatchee. And this is the conceptual plan. And so to meet the Lee Plan policy as one of the criteria for the special exception, it is consistent with the rural future land use category. It's a passive recreational use. The public facilities are in all land uses allowed per policy 2.1.3. They did held the public informational meetings in Alva and Olga to comply with 27.1.8. It is consistent with the Great Calusa Blueway map, which is our Lee Plan, and policy 27.3.3. The project is being designed to not obstruct floodways because it does have a FEMA component in here, so a no-rise certificate will be required at time of development. And there is a natural waterway buffer that's proposed in that area, in the 50-foot natural waterway buffer, to provide some water quality and protection from erosion along the shorelines, as well as provide screening for abutting properties. It provides access to Telegraph Creek so that the public may enjoy the scenic, historic, recreational, and natural resources. This is in the North Olga and Alva Community Plan. Those plans and the folks out there want that passive rec to be accessible by the public, and that meets the objectives in 28.6 and 29.6. It also is designed to provide green infrastructure to filter runoff, as I mentioned, the vegetated buffers abutting the natural waterways, and then to preserve sensitive coastal areas. So the site is being designed with the gravel parking and elevated boardwalks going to the observation pier. The existing site for the kayak launch is currently in that right-of-way, like half in, half out of the property. So the applicant will be moving the kayak launch onto the property. As I mentioned, the taking of that right-of-way kind of made it out of compliance, so it had to be moved. No development in wetlands regulated by the state of Florida may commence without state agency permit or authorization. So there is a blue line that is represented on the master or the site plan right here that is has not been verified by the state that is the state wetland line. But if under permitting there is more of a wetland down in this area, they will have to permit and mitigate accordingly and demonstrate that at time of development order. And there is a condition for the wetland permitting as part of the approval of this case. The Land Development Code, I want to touch a little bit on the intricacies of the natural waterway buffer because it's kind of important. Staff did visit the site. Staff walked along the edge of the Telegraph Creek, kind of looking to see if the observation pier went here, what were we looking at across Telegraph Creek? How did the natural waterway buffer work in this vicinity to provide the screening and protection for the adjacent properties view into the site? This natural waterway buffer is a code requirement. It needs to be 50 feet. It's measured from mean high water or top of bank. And as you can see on the site plan, the top of bank is identified, and the measurement is going from the 50-foot top of bank. The applicant can claim native plants in this vicinity to meet the requirements for the buffer. And the buffer is 6 native canopy trees and 50 native shrubs every 100 linear feet. So some of this vegetation in here is native. As you work back in the property, the exotics become more prolific, so they'll have to be removed. But some of this can be saved to meet the requirements. Moving along in the code, the 25-foot buffer is a requirement in the Alva Community Plan in 33-1673. It's a 25-foot wide buffer along North River Road. The buffer content is the native canopy trees that need to be live oaks or laurel oaks. They're 14 feet in height and spaced 25 foot on center. In this vicinity in here, there are some really nice oak trees that the applicant has stated they're going to try and work around. I want to note that there is this pathway that goes to the existing. That pathway will be moved to meet up with the parking link, and then this is going into that 25-foot wide buffer. In our code, there's a section in there that talks about impervious in a buffer, and it's capped at 20% threshold, and the applicant did demonstrate that at time of review that does not trip the threshold of that. So that walkway going in there does not make it not in compliance with the land development code. Moving on to the dock and shore portion, that is for the fishing and observation platform. In our code, and Christine went over this thoroughly, is 26-73 is the code for a fishing pier or observation deck. There's specific language in there about the height, and I kind of want to go over that because of the compatibility. The terminal platform and access walkway must be 5 feet above mean high water, is how the code reads. So at time of dock and shore permitting, because this will come in, anything landward will be on the development order, anything water component will be on the dock and shore permit. It will be reviewed for the height of this to demonstrate, and then it doesn't impede 25% of the navigable waterway. Those are the two important concepts I wanted to point out just because of the proximity. There is a structure. It might be seen better. There's a lot of trees on this adjacent property. There is a single-family home that's directly across Telegraph from this, that when we did our site visit, we saw. And so I'm very sensitive to what this shoreline looks like with our buffer in there and then this observation pier.
And is the location of the observation pier directly across from the home as well?
It's hard to tell because, this isn't to scale. So going out there, jogging it from where this input is for the kayak launch to where approximately it is, it might be just a little bit north because I think the structure is like down here, but I have the aerials that we can kind of try and zoom in. There's a lot of vegetation. It's hard to see where the structure line is on that. So the recommended conditions for approval, it's the standard state wetland permit condition. So development activity must remain in compliance with the applicable state and wetland permits and applicable local development permits. If impacts to wetlands are not permitted by the state or if issued state wetland permits are inconsistent with proposed impacts to wetlands depicted within the local development order approval, the developer has to amend that DO. So if they get an approval on the development order, the permit comes in from the state showing something different, they're going to have to amend the county's site plans to recognize the state permitting or provide the mitigation process. The FEMA floodway, we've discussed that. It's a no-rise certificate that must be submitted to development services. And that the last one is just the development order must be in substantial compliance with the site plan that we received on November 15th, 2022. And staff believes that the finding and conclusions for the special exception are met through this application. And I'm here if you have any questions.
Just going back to the site plan again for 1
Sure.
second. You noted the blue line was the informal determination of the wetland, but there's the one that jogs that's dashed, and then there's a solid blue line.
This solid blue line is the 50-foot natural waterway buffer.
The one that's above, that's that one.
This one right here?
No, that's the dashed one. It's right below that. Yes,
Right
that.
here.
What is that?
This,
Right at the right
I
of way.
believe, is the right-of-way line.
Okay.
And yeah, there's a 25-foot buffer.
Okay, so that's the 25-foot buffer line, and then the jurisdictional is the blue dotted.
The blue dotted.
It goes through the
Parking.
parking, so it's hard to see in that area. Okay.
Yeah, it kind of goes up along the western side and then jogs back down and then comes straight across and then kind of cuts over.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That was the extent of my questions. Does the applicant have any questions, staff?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we will open up the public comment period. As I said, I'm going to call the cards in the order that I have them. The first one I have is for Frederick Tires. Good morning, sir.
Hi. I have lived on Telegraph Creek for 47 years, and I am for any kind of development that is something for people to do. Access to it is a fine thing. By talking to my neighbors here, I think the big issue is the traffic on North River Road. One of my neighbors mentioned she's seen 2 fatalities there. Now, if they involved kayakers, or was it just the people that ride through a 45 mile an hour at 80, 90 mile an hour every day? That's another question. But I just wanted to say that I've seen a lot of changes, and this is one for the better.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for coming today, sir. The next one I have is for Deborah White.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. My name is Deborah White. I live 2 houses down creek from the proposed boat launch area. Since it became an unofficial boat launch area, I've seen a tremendous increase in the flow of boats now. I mean, I don't even know whether they're going to let jet skis launch from there, but I mean, jet skis, you know, zoom up and down the creek all the time. And then there's the matter of my privacy. One day I'm sitting there looking out the window and there's 2 people out there with a kayak in my backyard. So it was distressing to me. They already have kayak use at Manatee Park. I don't know why that just can't be the place that everybody goes. And of course, it's a 45 mile an hour zone and it's dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today, ma'am.
You're welcome.
The next card I have is for Terry Chadwell.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am the owner of the property that borders this to the west and to the little sliver of land to the south that was mentioned before. When I built my house on the property, I don't remember if it was 96 or 97, but it had a small house on it with a driveway that had been there since the early 40s, the 1945, I think it was. Lee County, and I have a submission for you of where the old driveway used to be. We did not intend to move the driveway, although it was very dangerous. We couldn't see across the bridge for traffic that is coming. It is the first opportunity people have to pass. So the moment they hit the bridge, they start passing in front of that area. We moved, per the county's request, our driveway over 150 feet away from the existing driveway and the bridge. It is still not safe. Traffic does come over the bridge at a 70 to 80 mile an hour range. I am the one who's personally seen 7 accidents in front of that stretch of highway with 2 fatalities. Unfortunately, I don't know what goes on when I'm not home, but I was home for those. We've had our fence repaired numerous times. To my count, just in the last 5 or 6 years, we've repaired it 5 times from people going through it. As a result of how busy the road has become, that is my primary issue. We were very pleased when the county bought our property. We have no problems with that at all. I do have an issue, though, with the safety. The last thing I tell people before they leave my house is look at the bridge at least 3 times before you pull out, because it is a very dangerous area. And this will show where the old driveway was and where the new driveway is. So no concerns about the building. I do have one question, though. When we talk about property lines, your property line is to the top of the bank. When Corps of Engineers was out, nothing is supposedly allowed to be built on the banks or into the waterway. The property line stops at the top of the land. My property and the property across the street from that was deeded before they changed the law, which means we own through the waterway to each other, basically. But that piece of property does not. So when you put something on the bank of that property, how do we do that? You know, what Lee Simmons is who I spoke with at the Corps of Engineers, was the officer that came out when the previous owner desecrated all the trees on the lot, and had him relay, what do you call it, netting to reinforce the banks to keep them from eroding, because what he did to the banks, north, east, and south, has caused a tremendous amount of erosion in the area. Do you have the site plan that you had up before the aerial? Could that be brought back up?
That should be the same.
The aerial picture photograph that you had? When you talk about the deeding of the land? Actually, number 5 or 4 or 5 would be perfect. May I approach?
Yes.
This is my property. This is also my property. It's not a small sliver of land. It's 168 feet long from west to east or east to west, whichever way you want to look at it. And it does border you here to the west. That's fine. The west is not my concern. The south portion is my concern. And we just want to make sure that nothing is further done to the property that allows erosion. But the biggest concern is safety and traffic. You cannot come and go from that piece of property safely. It's just not possible. It doesn't matter whether they're parked in the easement or if you move parking into the lot. It doesn't change the situation of getting onto North River Road. Unfortunately, and you may hear from other neighbors, we have had at least 3 times the traffic in the last couple of years than we've ever experienced before. We also have a large amount of dump trucks using Highway 78 as a thoroughfare. My understanding, that's not supposed to happen, but it is rather a dangerous situation. Had one come through my fence, actually, jumped our driveway and ended up in the woods inside the gate. So it is extremely dangerous. And I think the biggest concern here for us is safety. Intentionally trying to increase traffic to the park is there's a reason I don't own the piece of property, and that is the reason. It's a huge liability to me as a landowner for that piece of property, purely for traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. The next card I have is for Cheyenne LaBelle. Thank you. And Don LaBelle, yes. Good morning,
Hi, how are you? What was your name again?
Ms. Amanda Rivera.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Donald LaBelle. I live right here, directly across the street from the park that's going in. And as a woman previous addressed, the traffic there is ridiculous. It's crazy. And if one of these kayakers get killed there, I mean, that's on y'all. I watch for myself. The concern and problem I have is, since this park's been put in, I've had my truck stolen right out of my driveway. I've lost trolling motors, fishing rods. If this park continues to go in there and it stays in there, it has to have some kind of gate like y'all have. Daylight to dark gate. If you're gonna put a pavilion in, a fishing pier, all the undesirables are gonna be there after hours in the middle of the night. I don't know how many fist fights me and my wife have almost got into. People over there at midnight that I've had to run off. And I mean, I'm getting mad right now just thinking about it, but. So it's a big safety issue. Not only, I mean, for the traffic, like the lady talked of, the traffic's terrible there. Somebody's gonna get killed eventually, and it's gonna be, I mean, $230,000 park's gonna cost the county millions of dollars from a death, somebody getting run over there. And the 7 spots that are there now, there's already room to park 7 cars there. And at times, there's so many people, the Northerners, I mean, great, let them come kayak. They still park along the right of way. 7 spots is not big enough for weekend times. I mean, there's people that come there with vans that got trailer loads of kayaks, and there's not enough room for people to park there. But if it goes ahead and goes through, whatever happens, I mean, there's got to be some kind of gate put up there. I mean, calling the cops doesn't work. It's not a very high crime area. When you call the cops for a non-emergency, it's 2 hours for a cop to get out there. By the time they do smoke their crack, drink their beer, and they've already left. So here I am in the middle of the night standing at my gate about to fist fight somebody because I don't want my stuff and my property stolen. But other than that, that's all I have to say about it.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming. The next card I have is for Clay Archie.
Good morning,
Good morning.
mining examiner. I'm gonna have you hang on to my exhibits
Okay.
and follow along as a narrative. I've got
Thank you.
quite a package.
And can you identify for the record just what these are?
These are exhibits to narrate the story of a little bit about how, you know, a historical timeline. We've heard some of it, of how we've got to where we are with the park, but also from the standpoint of a lot of the points are talking about the Lee plan and relating to the narrative of request attached to the staff package. So, and just for the record, first and foremost, we own this property here, the fence property. And it is a little bit of an emotional journey for me here today because the 2 public input meetings that we weren't able to attend, me or my father, I believe they were on September 9th and 13th. And after a vehicular car crash on August 20, 2021, he lasted until September 11th. So we weren't able to make it to the community meetings because he was succumbing to a vehicular accident. So I'll put that in the record and just note that because you're going to hear a little bit about traffic safety a little bit later. So, but again, I'm just going to read this, and I will email this in to the hearing examiner, my commentary and document later. So, but good morning. I'm here, Clay Archie. As I said, we own the property across the creek. My dad's family has owned it since the early 40s. I'm here to discuss my opposition of the existence of the Telegraph, the pure existence of the Telegraph Creek Canoe and Kayak Park or its exposed or proposed expansion. Let me share a brief history of how the park came to be. For a number of years prior to 2013, the site was owned by an absentee owner from Texas, who we've heard some about today, who passed away in the early 2000s. In 2013, one of the heirs was looking at options/opportunities on the land and requested FDEP to do an informal wetland determination on the property. This report can be found in my submission as Exhibit 1. After FDEP determined there was significant hydric soil, wetlands, and wetland plant species on the property, the Texas owners at some point between 2013 and July 2017 decided to sell the parcel in its untouched state. The buyer was a local man named Trepper. He bought the property and later applied for a fence permit. In July of 2017, you can see by the picture in Exhibit 2, he erected a border fence, but also on the frontage of the property, but also fenced off the right-of-way, trying to stop the historic, illegal, and unsafe use of the right-of-way by canoe and kayak launchers. Please note how the county road in the exhibit has been significantly damaged by this illegal use and compared to the opposite side of North River Road by Mr. LaBelle's driveway. In 2018, Trepper received a code violation after the kayakers argued that he cut them off from their illegal access point. He tried to take the law into his own hands instead of using the law, and he should have said he was within his rights to build his border fence, but he should have used the law to try to stop the historic illegal access point. He didn't do that. So around the same time that Trepper that he built his fence and all, he brought in heavy equipment, which impacted the wetlands significantly on the property, and even crossed onto the neighbor's land, that sliver, and impacted some of their wetlands. This landed him in serious trouble with code violations from Lee County. Under duress from upsetting the kayakers and under duress from the county and his neighbors for impacting/destroying wetlands on all of his property, in 2019, Trepper allowed Lee County to perform a Phase 1 environmental assessment on the parcel. You can see this in my submittal package as Exhibit 3. Please note, if you actually look at this assessment, although it calls itself an environmental assessment, it in no way denotes or mentions wetlands of any kind on the site. It only serves to identify hazardous waste threats on the property. Eventually, on January 10th, 2020, Lee County purchased the property from Trepper. Even though Trepper had to perform mitigation for his code violation, wetland impacts, this is where the county begins to get reckless in their actions and disregard for public safety regarding this site. Per the County Parks and Rec website, it reads, the Telegraph Creek Kayak Park parking lot and launch area was cleared and graded on January 28th and 29th, 2020 by Lee County's heavy equipment crew. Despite not having any of the proper environmental resource permits from South Florida Water Management District or FDEP. You can see my Exhibit 5 that shows this in email correspondence to Melissa Lawrence at South Florida Water Management District. They also adopted a new mowing/maintenance schedule aimed at keeping native species on the site from regenerating on the park, the ones that were impacted. Even the previous owners from Texas, in their evaluation in 2013, had contacted FDEP about wetlands on the site. Why didn't the county do this for a proper site evaluation like is suggested in Lee Plan 29.6.6? Support the development of nature-based tourism where appropriate in the community. This ill-fated appropriate placement of a kayak park should additionally be checked by Objective 29.7, conservation, which says to preserve, protect, and where possible, enhance ecological value and natural beauty of North Olga. 29.7.1 additionally states focus should be on balancing public access to the Caloosahatchee in respect to preservation of rivers and natural features and function. Telegraph Creek is in fact an FDEP state-designated impaired water body. See Exhibit 6. I asked this hearing examiner, how does expanding Telegraph's use to an increased public load ultimately help the creek or river heal from its impaired state? Just yesterday, I did an inspection of the park's parking area and found toilet tissue in the public parking area with fecal matter on it. I'll spare this photographic evidence for the hearing examiner, unless she so desires it. The staff report also cites Lee Plan 27.3.2 and 27.3.3, which are in the staff report, but I ask, how was a site like this even vetted for legitimacy without staff ever even attaining the proper environmental permits during its development in 2020? The staff report twists the language. What 27.3.2 really states is to identify, maintain, and enhance, yet again, appropriate public access while balancing new ongoing efforts to protect and enhance the community's water quality and natural resources. This spin on the Lee Plan language continues through the staff report, where it says Objective 28.6 promotes public access to and the enjoyment of scenic, historic, recreational, and natural resources. But staff doesn't go far enough, as 28.6.3 really states that the enjoyments and access points should be at identifiable areas suitable for passive activities. Suitable is the key word there. Additionally, 28.6.4 says recreational opportunities will, yet again, be balanced with the protection of natural resources. This evaluation to maintain balance was not and has not been done in this instance. Next, staff cites 29.6. Yes, it has great spirit, but this park does not meet the spirit, as it contradicts 29.6 with items like, I was told the other day it was going to be impervious parking area. Now I'm heard in this hearing that it's going to be gravel. Well, we all know that gravel eventually gets filled up unless there's some kind of maintenance schedule to replace it. So I'm going to call it impervious. So where did I lose myself? Sorry. And even more, so with items like impervious parking surface, and even more counter staff's later citation of policy 61.3.3, which encourages floodways remain as unobstructed as possible. All while this plan proposes non-grandfathered public obstructions like picnic shelters, fishing piers, and garbage cans planned to be built into a known floodway of a state-designated impaired water body. You can see from Exhibit 7A and 7B, Hurricane N flooding pictures of the park. They're pretty extreme. Lastly, I want us to go back to a portion of the North Olga plan that staff skipped, 29.4 transportation. 29.4 states, road improvements within the North Olga community will promote the community goal to maintain its rural character and provide safe access for roadways. 29.4.1 goes even further to say that future improvements should only be pursued after careful analysis of safety, need, community, and environmental impact. This section of North River Road is a very dangerous one, as you've already heard today, from people that live there. Planning staff left me little time to prepare for today's hearing, only about 2.5 to 3 weeks in fact. But from this time last year, via public records request to the Lee Sheriff's Office from the period of 2017 through early 2022, there were 68 vehicle accidents on this small stretch of North River Road. Maybe some were even caused by this county's illegal development activity here. I submit to you today, Exhibit 8, an independent evaluation by Sands Laster, P.E., and notable Florida traffic engineer. Basically, the driveway to this park as it sits and its proximity to the bridge creates a very dangerous line of sight situation via egress from the site, which he states in his letter that you've got there in your package. Per 29.4.1, improvements should only be pursued after careful analysis. The county didn't consider this when looking at buying this site. They just bought it and now have a very dangerous site that they are trying to make even more dangerous traffic-wise and even more harmful to the water body by expanding its use impact. Finally, the Telegraph Creek Preserve is about a half a mile east of here. Why wasn't a canoe or kayak park considered on that site? With the money the county spent on this dangerous site, the money they have planned to expand it with, and the money they have spent maintaining it all this time, they could have more than paid for a nice facility in the Telegraph Creek Preserve. I ask that the hearing examiner deny this or any action on this parcel and recommend Lee DOT work to cut off this historic, illegal, and unsafe use of the right-of-way and recommend the county immediately look to dispose of the property before someone is seriously injured or the environment is further impacted by the county's reckless actions via their ownership of this parcel. Do you have any questions for me, Madam Examiner?
Thank you. Does the applicant have any questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did applicant or staff need to take a break before rebuttal? Are you prepared to respond? You're good?
Do you want to take a break? You good?
Okay. Great. We could go back to the applicant. Good morning again.
So, I don't know if there's any questions that came out of any of those that
They
you'd
have a
like me to
question about
address, I could do.
If the site's going to be gated, can you address that question?
That I'm not aware of any plans for gating it.
Is that typically done on these kind of park facilities?
Let me let the Parks Director talk
Okay,
on that.
thank you. Good morning again.
Good morning. Jesse Lavender, Director of Lee County Parks and Recreation. If there is a need to have a gate will be in place.
And how is that usually determined? Is there a process? I'm not familiar with how the Parks Department, I've been personally to some facilities and some are gated and some are not.
If there are illegal activities, whatever we can do to create that safe environment after hours, if we have historic instances, as the neighbor mentioned, people there when they shouldn't be, we'll install a gate.
So the concerns that neighbor discussed, should they direct them to the Parks Department? Is that how
Absolutely.
Okay, that's how that would be addressed. Okay, thank you. And then I guess if you could just briefly talk about this last question about another facility that's close by. Is there a kayak facility at that location?
So the county owns, it's roughly 5,200 acres in between Telegraph Creek Preserve and Bob Janes Preserve, which are both located a little bit east and north of this parcel. Those are preserve lands. We typically have trails, and if it's feasible to have a kayak launch, we would do that. However, the location from the parking area to the Telegraph Creek itself is a little bit lengthy, and we were looking at this site being that kayak launch that's more convenient for our patrons.
Thank you. Thank you. And I get, for the applicant, I guess, if you could just talk briefly about what other permits are going to be required before you're actually able to install the facilities that are shown?
Correct. The conceptual site plan that you see is exactly that. It's conceptual, and detailed site plans will need to be developed. That will have to be done in conjunction with the wetland permit that would need to be required from the state and the Army Corps of Engineers, as well as the no-rise permit as well.
You would have federal permitting, Lee County
State permitting in Lee County, yeah. All of it has to have the checks and balances before anything's finalized on there.
And does the DEP or the Water Management District typically issue those permits now?
My understanding is I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay, but there would be the 3 levels of review that are after this process before anything would actually be developed to ensure the erosion concerns that we heard about and any kind of legal ability to locate at that location would be vetted before you could actually install anything.
Correct. And I do know there was a preliminary wetland evaluation done as the property was purchased as well, and so there's some preliminary information available.
Okay, thank you. I think that was the, oh, jet skis. Are there any motorized motorcraft that are going to be?
No, it wouldn't be able to use a primitive kayak launch there. There'd be no
There would be canoes,
ability.
kayaks, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's meant for paddle crafts, canoes, kayaks, things that can be dragged in, not driven in.
Thank you. Staff have any questions, or, excuse me, comments to put?
No, I do have just one small thing, just to put on the
Please.
record. And Madam Hearing Examiner, you kind of touched on it with the state permitting. Staff, when we do site visits, we evaluate the site, the surrounding uses. Environmental staff will look at native species. We do not evaluate wetlands. So one of the members of the public was talking about how nothing was done to evaluate the we don't do that. That's why there's a condition in this application for approval for a state wetland permit, because the district or DEP will be evaluating the landward portion, and the DEP will be looking at the dock and shore portion for that segment. And then on top of all of that, our code sets up a natural waterway buffer that is an actual buffer for erosion and water quality. So if there's a problem with erosion on that shoreline from past activity that was done illegally, the plant material that's going in there will help to anchor that shoreline as well as filter. In addition, this site, and I mentioned this in the presentation, as you work south on this site, the exotics become more and more prevalent. So that's a deterrent. So through this, with that natural waterway, you're going to have some of the natives being brought in, a seed source being brought in through the shrub and the tree material. So I just wanted to put that on the record to clarify that county doesn't get involved in every aspect. We rely on our sister agencies as well.
But the wetlands will be evaluated, again, just to reiterate the last.
Correct.
And there's in addition to the state requirement, there is a condition of this approval that you've recommended that will
Correct.
require that as well.
Yep.
Just to briefly touch on traffic, because that was something everyone discussed. In this context, can you just discuss what the county looks at, that it's?
So what we're going to look at when this comes in, they'll look at the intersection separation from the driveway going into the site to the existing driveways in the adjacent properties. The thing with this site is currently, I don't know if you've gone and done your site check or not.
No, I will before.
You pull into the right-of-way. You're parking in the right-of-way. You leave in the right-of-way. I've been out there 3 times now. And to get up and over the hump, because they're right, there is degradation that's happening on that side. That's all improvements that is going to be done here, and the parking is pushed further south. So you have a turnaround area. You have a working movement area. When you pull out of there, it's the same pull out. This area is right by the bridge. I mean, your clearance, when you look right, you can only see when someone's coming over the bridge. And I'm going to be honest, they're going at a clip, but that's all along North River Road. So this site's been used for this use prior to the county. People have been parking in the right-of-way. What the county's trying to do is legitimize and bring this site up to current code.
And in the context of this request, the staff is limited to only review the traffic that's generated by this specific request.
Correct.
Not the background traffic that's already
Correct.
existing.
That is correct.
And the staff's assessment was that the improvement made of getting those cars off of the right-of-way would improve public safety.
Correct. DOT did review this special exception.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Were there any closing comments that the applicant wanted to put on the record?
Appreciate your time. I appreciate the community coming out and speaking and kind of talking about some of the issues that they've seen regarding the site itself and the impacts on the neighborhood and everything. We do feel that this is a good purpose and intent for the site. It's passive. And we hope that the community will enjoy it as much as they can. So, thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming today. If you spoke today and filled out a card, you will receive a copy of the decision once it's released. If you did not speak but would still like to receive a copy, you can notify staff as well, and we can be sure that you get a copy. Thank you everybody for coming today. Please stay safe and stay well.